Welcome back. We are now going to begin to talk about the core teaching of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the divine principle. We're going to teach the principle of creation. If you've come to this without seeing the introduction, I recommend you go back and see it in order with the introduction and then follow in order. We'll number the lectures so that you can keep them in order, okay? Let's begin by studying the principle of creation. It's important, before we talk about human beings as fallen people or the human fall, to talk about God's original ideal. And also, in fact, some people refuse to believe in God. So we need to discuss God, talk about God, again in a logical, scientific way, so that people who have been raised in this modern society can accept the existence of God as a possibility, as a probability. We cannot prove the existence of God, because God's existence, if God created us, we are a resultant being. God is the causal being, right? How can the resultant being prove that the causal being exists? It's actually philosophically impossible, because the causal being is bigger and more complex than anything he can create. So we are struggling to understand the simplest things about history and about ourselves, about the body, about many things. For us to say we can completely understand the existence of God is, again, arrogant and foolish. But to accept the probability, the possibility of God's existence, to begin to reach out in faith to a God that might exist, that I would like to know, and I would like to meet, is our goal. And also, before we discuss fixing the problems of human society, which the divine principle promises to do, we should look at the original blueprint for human beings and the rest of creation. Let's use the analogy of an automobile. If you have a beautiful new automobile, maybe a Jaguar, you like a Jaguar or a Maserati, or a nice new Ford, or you have some new car, okay, and it's beautiful, and suddenly something happens. It smashes into a wall, it gets broken, or it maybe squirrels go in the engine and eat all the wiring, or something happens to ruin the car. It doesn't work anymore. The car is broken. You're not going to open that hood up and try to fix it unless you have the manual. You're going to have a blueprint. You're going to have the factory manual, the original blueprint, how this car was made, the original ideal for the car. So when you see a wire that's supposed to be attached over here that has been cut in half or is loose, you go, oh, blueprint, problem, fix it. You can fix problems when you know what the original ideal is. Same thing with the human body. Would a doctor try to heal sickness if he didn't study a healthy human body first? The first thing a doctor does is study anatomy. He studies the way the human body is supposed to function when it's healthy. Then, when he notices in one of his patients or her patients, he notices or she notices some problem, a buildup of cholesterol, a pulled muscle, a strain, a break, something wrong, he can or she can identify, the doctor can identify that problem and say, that's your problem. And then they can work on finding a solution. You know, drugs or surgery or some kind of therapy or something. Diet or exercise, whatever it takes to fix the problem. Right? So it makes sense, right? So before we discuss the human fall in the next chapter and the work of restoration that God's been doing to fix the fall, let's discuss what would a healthy human being, a healthy human society, a healthy universe look like. Now, it may be hard, though, to find out what is a healthy human being. If we're Christian, we believe that Jesus is an example, a model of a healthy human being. But he's not there with us right now to talk to unless you're very open spiritually, unless you have a deep life of prayer, very few people have directly talked to Jesus. St. Paul is one. Many of the saints have reported talking directly to Jesus. Certainly the early apostles, when Jesus resurrected, they spoke with Jesus, the resurrected Jesus. But it requires enormous faith. And very few people have been able to do it. And no one has been able to really do it, like walk with Jesus, in the sense that he's right next to you all the time, and you can talk to him every day, and you can ask him questions about what it's like to be a perfect human being. If you're a Buddhist, you probably believe that Buddha is such a person. If you're a Confucianist, you probably believe Confucius was a true man. If you're a Muslim, you believe that Muhammad was an example of a true man, of a prophet. But these men have gone into the pages of history. And frankly, we don't have enough record of their lives to say that is what a true human being looks like. So, how are we going to do this? How are we going to see what is the true nature of a human being and the true nature of God? Let's look at the book of Romans in the Bible, Romans chapter 1, verse 20, where it says, ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and deity have been clearly perceived in the things that he has made, so they are without excuse. People who don't believe in God are without excuse. They have no excuse for not believing in God, Paul says in Romans, because God's nature, his power, his energy, and his deity, his nature, his character, are clearly perceived in the things that have been made. You were going to use that same idea that an artist shows his or her character through his or her works. When we study Picasso, we can see the different periods of Picasso's life. We can guess what Picasso was going through emotionally and spiritually. When we look at Van Gogh's paintings, they're unique. They look different from Picasso's paintings. When we look at Rodin, or we look at Rembrandt, we see a different character entirely. We look at Michelangelo or Da Vinci, we see a different character again. We can get to know the character of the artist through looking at the art. Because when you create something, and depending on your skill, your nature comes out in the way that you shape the objects that you're building, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, or whether it's, a film or photography, or even a director or a producer making a film. When you look at the films of one particular director, you can see that director's stamp on the film. The nature. Cameron Crowe did Jerry Maguire and Elizabethtown and a few other films. His films always have a lot of music in them, rock and roll music. He loves rock and roll. He always has a kind of free-flowing style. And kind of, it's a certain style, you can tell. When you look at a Cameron Crowe film, it's a certain style. And if you're a student of film, you can know, this is this director, this is this director, Martin Scorsese, this is this, Fellini had a certain quality, the famous Italian director. So we can know these very gifted artists by their work, because their skill allows them to show their character. Well, is God a skillful artist? Yes. The most skillful of all. So God's nature is being expressed in everything that God creates. Expresses God's nature. So by looking at everything in the creation, from the simplest energy through the building blocks of matter, which are particles, subatomic particles, and then we're going to look at the atoms, and then the molecules which are made of atoms, and then the compounds that are made from molecules, and then the beginning of life. We see the DNA strand, and we see plants, and then animals, and we see then finally human beings. So we see this complexity getting more and more deeply complex. Finally, human beings being the most complex of any creation that we have the ability to see. So by studying all of these things, we can look what common elements. Is God red because there's roses in the universe? Well, God must have red in his mind There must be red in God's thinking, but God is not only red because there's also green and blue. We cannot limit ourselves to things that are unique. We have to look at things that are common. What common elements do we find in everything? When we look at those common elements in everything in the creation, from energy and matter up to the most complex human beings, we should find common elements, and then we can say those elements came from God. They are within God. That nature is within God. So, let's look at two sets of characteristics. We're going to look at two of them. First, we're going to look at the masculine, feminine, yang, yin. Yang and in Korean, yin and yang in English. The idea of, the Korean flag, the idea of the Tao. The idea of this masculine and feminine relationship in everything. The second kind of dual characteristic we're going to look at is the relationship between an internal invisible nature guiding an external visible form. Some kind of character and form. Spirit and body. Internal and external. This kind of dual characteristic. So there's two sets of dual characteristics we're going to look at. The first one is the most obvious. Masculine, feminine. Everything has it. From energy, which is divided into positive and negative, plus and minus. We see it developing to atoms, which we have cation and anion, which forms molecules, which are plus and minus molecules, which then form chemical reactions to form all the matter in the universe. Then we look at the life. We see plants existing in this relationship in masculine and feminine, in stamen and pistil. There are single-celled, asexual plants and animals that seem to reproduce without any asexual reproduction, but most, we don't know yet what goes on actually within the cells in terms of the masculine and feminine give and take, but certainly the bulk from anything that we can really study, we see stamen and pistil in plants. We see male and female in animals, and we see in human beings man and woman. So it's fundamental to the universe that there's masculine and feminine, and the relationship between masculine and feminine gives rise to all the energy for existence, for reproduction, and for multiplication and for action. So this masculine and feminine is the most fundamental thing. So we can say that within God, there must be masculine and feminine, yang and yin, positive and negative. These two forces in relationship. Okay? The second set of dual characteristic is more deep and fundamental, more invisible, because it talks about the invisible mind and the visible body. So, in everything in the creation, even in energy, there's some kind of inherent directive nature that is causing the energy to shape itself a certain way. The four forces, the strong force, the weak force, the gravitational force, and the electromagnetic force, do not explain how energy, which exploded at the Big Bang, can form itself into protons, electrons, and revolve around themselves and create the multitude of complex structures we see in the universe. The second law of thermodynamics in chemistry says that all matter, all energy, tends to disperse into the widest possible, most random association. That order and structure are the opposite of entropy. Entropy seeks dissolution, the widespread. If I light a match, the heat from that match will not stay here in this room, but will have give and take with all the molecules and finally disperse through the whole room. That's the law of entropy. That energy tries to spread out. So why is it that the universe is defying the law of entropy? Why is it that an explosion, a Big Bang, could lead to such complex structures? which are not only self-maintaining, but continue to grow in complexity to the point where you have a DNA strand, a double helix, which is the most complex part, the building block of life. How can a big bang, an explosion of energy, lead to a double helix? I don't care how many billions of years you give it for random explosion of molecules smashing into each other. They're not going to build a double helix. It's not going to happen. The idea that it could happen without outside force being entered into the system is insane. It's not scientific. So if you're truly a scientist, you have to begin looking for what outside force is causing these energy to defy the law of entropy and to form structure. You have to begin looking for that source of energy. Because we find this inherent directive nature in everything. From energy to atoms, which hold them together in the structure of proton, electron, in the orbiting in the molecules and the different shells, right? Which we study in chemistry and in physics. To molecules, to the inherent directive nature of plants, which have tropism. Plants have tropism, which is the 4 different functions of the plant. They know where water is. We don't know how, but they know where water is. The roots will go toward water. They know where sunlight is. The sunflower will follow the sun, right? Then it knows where gravity, up and down, is. If you turn a seed upside down, the root will go back down again. So it knows where, it can feel gravity. It's not just like the seed sticks its sprout out. You plant a seed, and then whatever direction you plant the seed, that's where the root grows. That would be stupid. But the plant, that little seed, amazing. That little seed, which when you crush it open, it's just white mush. All you see when you open a seed is white mush. You open an apple seed, what do you see? White mush. A white little mush. And yet, in that little white mush, there's an apple tree. Think about that. In that zygote, a human zygote, a man and woman make love, the sperm enters the egg. In that one cell zygote, where the sperm, which is half a cell actually, and the egg, which is half a cell, because they each have only 23 chromosomes, they come together, they form one complete human cell. Woo! How is it that that one cell has all the information to build a human body? Oh, unbelievable. That is inherent directive nature. There is a nature within matter guiding it to shape and form itself according to God's blueprint. Finally, we see that nature in plants as this very automatic nature, like instinctive nature of plants. Plants have a kind of instinctive nature called tropism, knowing up and down, gravity, knowing the sun, knowing where water is, and other
feeling.
It can sense cold and it knows the seasons. It's many tropist natures, many natures that a plant has to allow it to function and live and be a plant. Those natures are guiding the seed to absorb certain minerals from the soil it needs, to absorb air and sunlight and water and minerals, and to create this plant that we see. It's beautiful, the multiplicity of different kinds of trees and plants. Animals also have an inherent directive nature. We call it instinct. All animals know intuitively, automatically, how to be an animal. They know how to be a squirrel. No one has to take them to squirrel school. You don't see a bunch of squirrels sitting down. This is a nut, little squirrel, and we eat the nut. Okay? You don't see that, right? Squirrels automatically grow up, and within days even of their birth, are functioning pretty much independently. Because they have an inherent directive nature, instinct. Human beings, finally. We have both an inherent directive nature, instinct. We want food. There's an inherent nature, instinctive nature to eat, to sleep, to have sex, to reproduce. We have the desire for warmth. And we have all those kind of tropic or instinctive natures inside ourselves. But we have also a higher nature, an internal nature, the mind, we'll call it, which is thoughtful, reflective, can go beyond time and space, beyond this physical world, can imagine things, the art comes from this. We don't see animals creating art. We don't see it. We don't see animals writing books or talking about philosophy or having discussions about life after death. Human beings are unique in the high level of internal activity that we have. We're self-reflective, and we also can perceive our place in the universe. And we're built by God as His children to be aware on a level that animals and plants and molecules cannot. But the one thing we have in common, all aspects, we want to receive love. Human beings want to receive God's love. We're built to want to receive love from the universe. We go out on a spring day and we sense something beautiful in the universe and we want to receive love from that. Then that nature to receive love, we see in animals too. They want to receive our love, not from God directly, but from human beings. Plants also want to receive human beings' love. Even rocks and molecules, you may not believe it, but they want to receive love. They respond to it. We know this because everything responds to love. What is love? Love is defined in the divine principle as an emotional force that the subject gives to the object to help it to reach its perfection, which also binds the subject and object into harmonious oneness. So love is an emotional force. It's a spiritual force that God gives to everything in the universe, but especially to us as His children. It's a force that we have the potential to give to animals, to plants, and to the rest of creation, and to each other. We don't always exercise our responsibility to give love. And we'll discuss that in the fall. But we do see enough examples of love in human society to know that it exists, that it is the highest power. People will live and die for love. People will kill themselves if they don't have love. Love is not food, it's not sleep, it's not sex, it's not a physical force, but without love you will wither and die. Children who are raised without love grow up sick and deformed. They're spiritually deformed. They've done studies. I don't know why they would ever torture children like that, but they don't do it on purpose, but they've done studies where children, maybe in an orphanage, are raised with a minimum of care. And you can see differences psychologically in the development of the child. And certainly there have been abusive cases where we can see that without love, children don't grow up healthy. Love, what is love? It's a spiritual force. It has nothing to do with the physical body. And yet we can feel it. When someone's loving you, you can feel it. If you're being looked at by someone who's admiring you, you can feel it. Women especially are sensitive to men's attention. When a man is looking at you, you can sense it. If you're in a room and a man is checking you out, you can feel it. Because women are built to receive the love from a man, and they want to receive that man's love. That's part of the man-woman relationship. So when a man loves a woman, she can feel the love coming to her, and it feels warm, and it feels satisfying. It is actually satisfying. It feeds us. We consume it. It feeds our spirit. And both animals and plants and molecules, everything wants to eat love. And they want to eat it from us. We were put in the position at the center of the universe to give love to everything else. But we get our love from God. So God's love is part of what we need to eat. It makes us whole. It makes us healthy. So, back to the argument about the dual characteristics of internal and external. This internal nature guides the external form, not the other way around. The internal nature, the mind, love, decides what the body is going to do. Animals will kill themselves for their masters. They will protect their masters with their life. Dogs have saved their masters' lives, given their lives to save their masters' lives because of the love they felt from their masters. There are many examples of that. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. It's so little understood in our society, but it's a very powerful force. It is the core of the human mind. Therefore, we can say that God also must have created everything in the universe according to his own nature, which is that God is an internal and external being in harmony. God's internal nature is centered on love, on heart. We define heart as the irresistible impulse to seek joy through loving. Again, let me repeat that. It's a very important definition of heart. Heart is the irresistible, irrepressible impulse to seek joy through giving love, through loving. Wow. God is a being of heart. God also has intellect. There's no greater scientist in the universe. God is brilliant. God also has emotions, feelings. Happy, sad, can feel all the feelings we feel. God also has will, desire, determination to accomplish things. He's not just floating, like a jellyfish in the ocean. God is a being of character, of force, of dynamic energy. Because we see those characteristics in human beings. We see intellect, emotion, and will. But the center of intellect, emotion, and will is love, is heart. The desire, irrepressible desire, impulse to seek joy through loving. This is God's internal nature. God's external form is the energy that God has in his being. We call it universal prime energy. Universal because it's everywhere. Prime, it's the first energy. And energy, because God has to have an energy to make up his being. So God is an energetic being, a being of energy. In Indian philosophy, it recognizes this energy. It does not talk about the internal aspect of God as much as it talks about the force of the universe. So in Indian philosophy, and also all Eastern philosophy, actually it talks about the energy of the universe. The Tao. The Tao, behind the Tao is the energy of the universe. So all Eastern philosophy recognizes that energy. Cosmic consciousness is one way it's put in yoga. The idea that the universe is conscious. It's alive, it's aware. But Eastern religions don't recognize God as a God of personality and character as much. It recognizes this energy as being impersonal. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam recognize, the people of the book, recognize God as a God of purpose and will. God has a purpose for the human history. God has ideas and emotions and thoughts. God gets angry. God expresses love. So God is a being of character. But it doesn't recognize God's universal prime energy. How God is present in all things through his energy. The principle brings Eastern and Western philosophy together by saying God is a being of internal character and external form, mind and body, invisible and visible nature. The energy of God, the universal prime energy, is not visible energy. It is the energy that creates the energy of this physical universe, that creates light, that creates energy that we can measure, heat and light. It is not in itself heat and light. It is the energy that creates it. So, God is a being of internal character, external form. Human beings were created as God's children to carry the most. We're created in God's image. The Bible says we're created in God's image. Right? Everything else in the creation is symbolically looks like God. Meaning there's an internal character and an external form. Instinct and a body in animals. Tropism, nature, and a body in plants. A cellular body in plants. Some kind of inherent directive nature and energy and matter in the rest of the universe, matter, right? But in human beings, we're God's image, because we're God's children, we're created to be God's children. The nature of God's mind is most highly developed in human beings, or it should be, if we fulfill our responsibility. We're the highest creation. So that means inside of us is the potential to look like God. We're supposed to become like God. When you say that we're God's children, that means we should look like God. If a dog has babies, they're puppies. They don't look like the big animal yet, but soon they grow up and become the dog. If a tree has seeds, the seed doesn't look like the tree yet, but you plant it and then it grows up and then it's just a little leaf or two. You can't really tell what it is yet, but eventually it grows up and it looks like the mother tree. Well, if we're God's children, our goal is to become like God. So that means looking at our nature, we can see the nature of God most reflected in human beings. If we can somehow see beyond the distortions of hate, of fear, of fallen nature, of sin. And we'll discuss that in the fall of man. Okay, so then we have two dual characteristics. Masculine and feminine, so God is male and female. And internal and external. God is a parent of love who, through her heart of love, trying to take care of her children and the universe that God created around us as our playground, as our home, as our nursery, so we could grow up in a healthy environment. This entire universe is created by God as a parent. Therefore, God is not just our Father, but our Father-Mother. God is a male-female being, masculine and feminine. So God is a parent. And then we are God's children. And the parent-child relationship is the fundamental thing that links everything together. Even with our pets, when we love an animal, we feel a parental love like it's our baby. And you want to cuddle it and pet it, and it's so cute, right? And we take care of it like a parent. And the animal feels that love. Animals can feel our love. They come and they want to receive that love. You see dogs come, their tails going crazy, and they're like licking you to death. And you're like, stop, stop, you know. And they're trying to lick you and jump on you, and not because they want to eat. Even if they're eating food, that's not the reason. They want love. And they'll come, they'll just sleep next to you. They'll put their head on your lap. You can pet them. They want love. This is the fundamental law of the universe, that everything is motivated by love. We are motivated to receive God's love. Animals and plants and minerals are motivated to receive our love. Even the minerals, they want to be part of our body. If you're a true human being, like Jesus, then the food would want to be eaten by you. The cells in the plants would want to be part of your body. They would want to serve you. They would want to be they'd want to be closer to the love. So they wouldn't be angry at being eaten. They would be happy to be eaten. Right? The problem is that, as Paul says in Romans chapter 8, the creation has been groaning in travail until now, waiting for the revealing of the true sons of God. Everything, the plants, the animals, even the minerals, are miserable. Would a plant want to be eaten by Hitler?
No.
Would anything want to be eaten by Hitler?
No.
It would be like, oh, I don't want to be part of that body. And all of us, to some extent, are contradictions of good and evil. So when we're in a contradiction, we eat, but then the food doesn't sit well with us. It wants to get out. We feel sick. And a lot of sickness comes because we're not healthy spiritually. And the food doesn't want to be part of us. This may sound exotic and wild, but you have to stretch your imagination and trust me on this. The universe is built on love. What proof, in case you're still doubting that minerals and plants and matter can feel love, this is just one proof I can offer, is the human brain. The human brain and the human body are made out of matter and energy. We're no different from the plants, animals, and rocks. We're maybe more complex, but we are still made out of matter and energy, molecules, right? If we die, our body starts to rot and decompose and decay and soon just goes right into the ground and melts. We're not different than the other animals and plants in that way. And yet, watch our brain. When I'm speaking to you, my mouth is following the command of my brain to communicate ideas that are inside the brain. I'm choosing what words to say, what language to speak in. I can speak in Spanish, puedo hablar en español, si quieres. I can speak in Italian, posso parlare in italiano. I can speak in Korean, 한국말로 얘기할 수 있어요. I can speak all the different languages. I'm choosing what language I'm choosing. Is it some automatic function of my brain? Is my brain choosing to speak to you? Think about it. You have to think deeply on this one. Is my brain speaking to you right now? That's really strange, actually. That matter, this is just gray stuff. You open somebody's head and you look inside, there's just gray stuff. It looks like cottage cheese or something. I mean, not really. I mean, it looks like a brain. It looks like a brain. It's kind of...
It's like a pinky...
It looks kind of curly and gray with little veins all throughout it. Okay? Is that brain speaking to you? The brain is matter and energy. If you claim that there's no spirit, that there's no internal nature, then that means that the matter and energy is speaking. Wow. I'm a rock. I'm a very complicated rock. I evolved, right, from rocks and from minerals, right? Everything in the universe evolved from minerals, right? If you're a scientifically minded person. It started with the Big Bang. There wasn't life in the Big Bang. So life evolved from minerals. So if you want to maintain your rigid, supposedly scientific, not really scientific, but rigid materialistic view of the universe, that there is no God, there's no spirit, there's no internal nature, it's just matter and energy in motion, as Stalin said. If you want to maintain that, you have to explain how this matter and energy is talking. How is a rock talking? I'm no different. I evolved from the rocks. So you're saying that that somehow that within the matter and energy that started the universe, this was there. Right? Because nothing can evolve unless the idea of it is already in the beginning. There has to be that kind of complexity to see that this come out. So there has to be intelligence in rocks, in energy, enough to speak. Do you follow this? It's a very complicated argument. It's very complex. But do you understand that you have a choice? If you see a person speaking or moving his hand or raising his eyebrows or smiling, all the decisions we make, if there's involuntary action, okay, you could say it's involuntary. You know, like, oh, something bit me, ow, you know. That's involuntary. Oh, ow, you know. But if I'm doing it on purpose, if I'm choosing to speak, if I'm using my hands, my gestures, you know, woo, I'm choosing to move my body to speak. You have to make a choice. Is the matter and energy choosing to speak? Because all I am is matter and energy, right? Materialism. Or you have to accept the idea of a spiritual existence. Either way, matter and energy has a spiritual component. You're stuck. Because if you accept the first one, that matter and energy has a spiritual side, then you just prove the argument. That there's a spiritual, speaking, living, loving, thinking part of energy. And if you don't want to accept that, then you accept the idea of a spiritual side, which is what the principle asserts, that there's a spiritual, separate, or not separate, but distinct spiritual side to everything that guides it. And that the core of that is love. Yes?
You can also see it in water. If you put like love, it'll show people.
Yeah, there were experiments done filming on a microscopic level the crystals that form of ice that form when water is treated with hatred or with love or different emotions. And it's shocking. You should see them. They're in Japan. The crystals are ugly and like distorted when the water is being hated, like when there's hate in the environment around the world, like bad words or angry shouting is sent to the water, then you take a crystal from that water and it's ugly. When love is put into the water looks beautiful, the crystals are formed beautifully. It's very interesting. And modern medical science is starting to understand this too, that people who are filled with hate and stress become sick and die. They get cancer for no reason, we don't know why, but stress, which is caused by anger and fallen nature and all the sin bubbling up and conflicting with others, makes us sick.
They did a study on plants too.
What's that?
They did a study on plants, and they used music, different kinds of music,
Yeah.
and hateful, like rock and roll,
Yeah, like
metal,
heavy metal.
Heavy metal was on, you know, the plants actually, they actually died from it. And then you go to pop and all that kind of stuff. They're still not, it's not so healthy. But then you get into classical, and that's like the healthiest for the plant.
Recently I've been watching Joaquin Rodrigo's Concierto de Aranjuez, which is a Spanish concerto for guitar and orchestra. I'm in love with it. It's very, very beautiful. And I can feel it uplifting my spirit when I listen to it. It's like heavenly music, you know. So the point is this, that we are spiritual beings. Because God exists, God is the author of the universe, and God is a spiritual, energetic being. So He created us with a body and a mind. And He created everything in the universe with a kind of a body and a mind, but we're the center. In relation to the universe, God is the masculine subject, the author of the universe. So that's why in Christianity they've referred to God as our Father. Because Father emphasizes God's masculinity, which is God's subjective nature. Because femininity is more receptive. In the yang and yin relationship, masculinity is outgoing and positive. Femininity is receptive and receiving and ingoing. Even the sexual organs reflect that. The man's sexual organs out and the woman's is in. The woman takes the man's seed and holds it and nurtures it. In the relationship with the universe, God is like a masculine subject, and the universe is God's feminine object, almost like God's bride. And God's love comes into the universe, and then the universe holds it and gives birth to His children. Isn't that beautiful? So the whole universe is like a man and a woman in a relationship. God is the masculine subject, and the universe is God's feminine object. And then when God loves the universe, it conceives a child, which is us. And we were born in that universe. And God's the spiritual, and then as we grow and live in this physical universe, when we're born from this physical universe, what does that mean? When you're born from the physical universe, what does that mean? When you leave the physical universe, you die. We call it dying, right? When you die, you have finally achieved you've first spent 10 months, right, in the womb. 10 months by the Asian calendar, because it's 280 days, right? From the first day of the last menstrual period until the birth. 266 days if you count from day of conception. But 280 days if you count from the first day of the last menstrual period. 280 days is 10 times 28. 10 lunar months. So it's very interesting that the moon is much more of a guide for the physical body, especially for women. The moon cycle is much more relevant than the sun cycle, the sun's movement. So if you look at the lunar calendar, it's 10 months. If you look at the solar calendar, it's 9 months. 9 months and 10 days. But anyway, we're spending that much time in the water bag, in the womb, perfecting our physical body, right? And getting ready to be born into the air. We're swimming around in water for 9, 10 months, right? And we don't know what love is. We don't know what air is. We don't know what eyes are for, but we're growing them, right? Do you know what your eyes are for when you're in the womb? You can't see. The eyes are mostly closed. And if you open them, you might see a dim light coming through the mother's womb, but not much. And then, you know, there's not much sound. There's muffled sounds. So your ears, you hear some sound. They've proven that babies can hear, of course. And then you can touch things, but not so much. Your 5 senses are not so useful when you're swimming around in a womb. Okay? And also your ability to love is not really being tested in the womb. You're just growing. You're receiving the mother's love in the womb. After 9, 10 months, you're born. Your life in the womb is over. All your food and nutrition is coming to you from what when you're in the womb?
The placenta.
The placenta. There's a sac attached to the side of the womb, it looks kind of like a liver. It's very, very thick, and it's a filter for the mother's nutrition and for the baby's waste. So basically, it's kind of an organ that's created by the woman's body or by the baby. They're not sure actually who actually instigates the creation of it, but between the baby and the mother, this thing is created inside the womb, and that way the baby might have a different blood type than the mother. And if the mother's and the baby's bloods mix, actually one of them could die because they might have different blood types, based on the father and mother's genetics. So they can't actually exchange the blood. So only blood plasma goes through this, and food, nutrition, goes through into the baby, from the placenta, through the umbilical cord to the baby's stomach, and the baby's eating from the mother, and the mother's feeding the baby and helping it grow. And at the same time, anything that the baby doesn't need, carbon dioxide and waste and things like this, get fed back out through the umbilical cord, through the placenta, and the mother digests them, and she processes that through her own kidneys and through her own body. So the baby's completely dependent on the mother, but especially on the placenta. So that placenta is like, the baby is really attached to the placenta, figuratively and literally, right? When the baby's born, the first thing the doctor does, after slapping their bottom, or maybe not, if the baby, more humane birth is, you get the baby to cry. You want the baby to cry, or breathe, so you clear the baby's nostrils and mouth. The baby starts to cry, breathing. Everyone's happy to hear the baby crying. Oh, everyone smiles, the baby's crying. Baby's miserable, but everyone else is happy. They cut the cord. They pinch it and cut the cord off. This is the lifeline for the baby for 9, 10 months, right? But it's cut. You don't need it anymore. Now you're going to begin breathing oxygen, and you're going to be eating. First the mother's milk, and then after a certain amount of time you'll begin eating solid food, and you'll get your stomach going, your digestion, and you'll pee and you'll poo. So you don't need your mother's body anymore to do those things for you. So for 9 or 10 months we're in this water bag. Then we get born into this world, and it's like dying. For the fetus, for the baby inside the womb, birth is like death. It's the end of life as I know it. Right? And not only that, they cut the cord. They cut off my lifeline. But God is smiling because God knows there's something better for the baby. Well, after 9 or 10 decades here on the earth, after a certain amount of time on the earth, growing in the airbag of this earth, in the airbag we breathe, we're living, we are preparing for another life. And spiritually open people have seen that the spiritual body, which is like our aura, the spiritual body is attached to the physical body by a lifeline. Not an umbilical cord, but a silver cord, which they say is attached to the top of the head or the heart. There's different connecting points. In the Indian system, they have 7 chakras, 7 energy centers. The top of the head, the forehead, the throat, the heart, the stomach, the sexual organs, and then the base of the spine right here. And they attribute those 7 chakras to the 7 desires. Fundamental desire for survival, for reproduction, for power, for love, for wisdom, or heart, for speech, for truth, for wisdom, and then for God. This is the 7 chakras in Indian system. But maybe those are also connecting points. Anyway, our body is connected to our spirit. They're actually joined with a silver cord, light, basically by spiritual energy. The two are joined. When you die, and you can read Life After Life by Dr. Moody. There's many books that have been written about people who've had near-death experiences. And they actually leave their body. Their spirit leaves their body and goes into the spiritual world for temporarily. But they're aware that if they leave their body too far, something's going to be cut, and they won't be able to go back. There's often a river or some kind of a line which they're not allowed to cross. Because if they do, they can't go back, they die. But it's clear you're not dying. You're actually going on to another life. And you have to cut off your physical body. You don't need it anymore. It's like the placenta. Our body, our physical body, is like the placenta in the womb to the fetus. It is a sac, this thing that we use and we love and we're attached to for 9 or 10 decades while we're living on the earth, which is the source of the nutrition that our spirit needs to be ready to go into the spiritual world, to be born in the spiritual world. And what is that nutrition? Love. Through living a life in a family, through growing up in a family, you know, with brothers and sisters, with parents who love you, through growing up in a family, you experience 4 kinds of love. And then, when you've fulfilled those 4 kinds of love, you're able to go into the spiritual world as a complete being. The first kind of love is children's love. You receive the love of your parents. Or you could call it parents' love. You receive parents' love as a child. Then you share love with your brothers and sisters. That's brother-sister love. And friends' love is part of that. Friends' love is a connection to brother-sister love. It's a corollary of brother-sister love. To love a friend. Then you have husband and wife love, conjugal love, sexual love. You know, which is very exclusive. Just one man, one woman loving each other. And that's the fundamental love that binds a man and woman together to make a new family. From that love, children are born. And then this man and woman can go beyond just conjugal love, sexual love, and they can begin to feel parents' love. And finally, when their children grow up, they've raised them, their parents' heart is growing and growing and getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Finally, their children get married. And then their children have children, and they can feel grandparents' love, which is like God's love. Because it's absolute, it's unconditional. You just love them. You don't need to guide or scold your grandchildren. Of course, grandparents do educate their grandchildren. But basically, parents' job is to teach and raise and, you know, take care of their children. The grandparents just love them. I've heard from every grandparent I've ever met, they all say the same thing. They say, you love your grandchildren more than you even love your own children. I've never heard a grandparent not say this. And it's very obvious. They are nuts. They lose their mind. I love the scene of Look Who's Talking with Kirstie Alley. And when the grandmother takes the baby from her, she's exhausted, she's in postpartum depression, and she's just too tired to take care of the baby. And her mother comes over and grabs the baby and goes, oh, do like this. And the baby looks at her and goes, yeah, you're lost it, lady. You know, you're nuts. And the grandparents are nuts. They lose their mind for their grandchildren. They love them. It's obvious. So that's God's love. And before we die, we should experience that unconditional love for a baby, for a child. And that's what grandparents feel. And then you're ready to die. To be born again into the spiritual world. You can leave your body, the placenta, you can leave this body behind. You don't need it anymore. And then the silver cord is cut. Because you don't need the connection anymore. And you're breathing love now. In the spiritual world, that's the love bag. That's where we breathe love for eternity. So 3 stages of life. The water bag, the air bag, the love bag. Okay? The water realm, the air realm, the love realm. This is a temporary realm. It's not meant to be eternal. It's a training ground for our spirit. It's a growing place for our spirit. It's a nursery for our spirit. It's a womb for our spirit to grow, to become one with God. That's the original blueprint. Okay? So, we'll take a break there, and when we come back, we'll talk about, keep it running. When we come back, we'll talk about how this creation actually functions, the actual mechanics, the 4-position foundation we're going to talk about, and the family, and the 3 blessings that God gave, and how we grow, and then we'll conclude with the spiritual world, okay? So that's what we'll do when we come back.